We got breaking news. Markets have just opened 1 minute ago. My goodness. And they are already down 433 points, wiping out yesterday's massive rally. That rally came, of course, because the president announced delaying the next round of Chinese tariffs. Well, that rally is clearly short-lived. This morning on CNBC, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross weighed in on the president's decision.
Nobody wants to take any chance of disrupting the Christmas season. We don't think there was much.
So you're saying we didn't extract anything from China to do this? There was no quid pro quo?
Not a quid pro quo.
No quid pro quo.
Decision made to do what we decided to do, namely just be a little extra protective.
The president.
No quid pro quo. Translation. The president bid against himself. I have the perfect guest to talk this over. Rufus Yerxa. He's the president of the National Foreign Trade Council. Kayla Tausche is Washington correspondent for CNBC. And my dearest friend, Dan Nathan, a principal at Risk Reversals and a former equity and options trader. Kayla, I got to start with Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross right there saying, listen, we cannot disrupt the Christmas season. We need to remind our audience, this administration has been saying all along, China is paying us billions in tariffs. If that were the case, the Christmas season wouldn't matter. And so what exactly is Wilbur Ross telling us, especially that China gave us nothing here?
Well, he's saying the same thing that we heard from the president and from a few of his other economic advisors in the last day, that they want to make very sure that there is not an impact on the Christmas season, that they are not the Grinches that have this economic impact that they have been saying doesn't exist this whole time. Importantly, though, he also said that there's no quid pro quo now, that there were no concessions made to the U.S. on the call. But he said that on Monday is the deadline for the U.S. to make a decision how it's going to treat Huawei going forward. I think you need to watch that space, because that is a situation where if you see them being dovish toward Huawei, you might see China announce some agricultural purchases. You might have friendlier thawing of relations going forward, or you might have an escalation in the other direction.
But how do you thaw relations going forward when it's so unclear what this president believes and what truth he's telling? I want to share what the president has said in the past, very recently, about these tariffs.
They pour money into their system. They pour it in. And because they do that, you're not paying for those tariffs. China's paying for those tariffs. Our people haven't paid, so we're taking in many billions of dollars. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars from China. They're paying us billions and billions of dollars of tariffs, which is fine with me.
So you have no coherent fiscal strategy. The president is flip-flopping on tariffs. And just yesterday, he made it clear he cares a whole lot more about preserving the markets then he's committed to this trade war.
Yeah, so we know that the president looks through this issue through the lens of the stock market. You know, back in August 1st, when the president announced these new tariffs by tweet, the stock market was in 1.5% from its all-time highs. It had just made a high in late July. So the fact of the matter is we're down 5%. This is a crisis created out of whole cloth by the president. It's really interesting to see him at those rallies with all those red MAGA hatters behind him. He's lying to them. That's really what your kind of sequence of clips is telling them. And so I think somebody got through to him over the last few days since the stock market took this shift lower that it is his base that will be adversely affected by any new tariffs that are focused on consumer goods. And the other point is really important to make.
But it's not just his base. Everyone will
Well, no, I understand. But think about it politically. Where did they move these tariffs to December 15th? As we get into the election season, we know that U.S. manufacturing and farmers are bearing the brunt of the existing 25% tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods. What comes next? It's the consumer that will be faced with the 10% on $300 billion of consumer goods. That doubly hits his base in the middle of America, if you think about it, because we know that manufacturing and farming is being adversely affected. That's why all the billions of dollars that we are collecting in tariffs are being socialized. They're being pushed back to farmers right now. So what comes next? This is what you really have to think about. If we do have these consumer tariffs, are there going to be tax cuts for individuals? Because did they need a bailout? Does that come next? I think these are really important issues to focus on as we go into the election.
The irony, though, is that the reason why they haven't seen a consumer impact yet, the president said this, Secretary Ross said this today, is because China's devaluing its currency. That has brought prices down. That has spared the U.S. consumer, actually. All
right, Rufus, put your China hat on today. Let's say you are China's trade rep. How do you see the president's decision yesterday? Yesterday should have been a very vulnerable day for China when you look at the conflict with Hong Kong and what a financial hub it is. Yet it was the president who blinked.
Yeah, this administration's whole China strategy is looking more and more chaotic and incoherent, pretty directionless. You know, the only people I can think of, the only Americans that I can think of who could have been happy with this sort of on again, off again tariff action of the last several days, or maybe the day traders, I don't know. But it doesn't help consumers. It doesn't help our farmers. It doesn't get us any closer to a deal with China. It creates more uncertainty for business. And from the Chinese point of view, I mean, they're looking at the Trump administration's inconsistency. I mean, one of the things we're taught as trade negotiators is don't ever let the other side see that you're negotiating with yourself. I mean, I don't see that this brings us any closer to a deal with China. I think they sit back and let Trump negotiate with himself for a period of time. I think that, you know, both sides are still very dug in on their positions. And, you know, it's not clear that the Trump administration has a coherent strategy for getting to a positive ending with China.
So what do you think China's next move is? I mean, do you think we're going to get any sort of deal before 2020, especially if you factor in the conflict going on there?
Well, I think it's looking less and less likely. Look, their strategy on China was always a big gamble from the start. Instead of sort of trying to build a coalition of free market democracies to build stronger trade rules and press China in the right direction, instead of joining TPP and doing those kinds of things, we did the exact opposite. We actually sort of fought some mini trade wars with our best allies while at the same time fighting a unilateral action against China on the theory that if we piled tariffs on China high enough, they would eventually capitulate and do what we want. And I think that now it's pretty clear that that strategy is not succeeding. And, you know, now within the Trump administration, there are clearly there's a lot of discord and a lot of worry about what the effects are, because everybody knew all along that tariffs aren't really good for our economy or their economy. The only rationale for using them is if you think it helps to move the other party in the right direction and you can eventually get rid of the tariffs.
One person who felt that way was Larry Kudlow. A month before he joined the administration, he wrote about what a terrible idea tariffs were. He's now the president's closest economic advisor. So who is the president listening to when you see him make moves like he did yesterday, clearly showing that propping up the stock market is his #1 priority?
Well, the president also said around the time that he hired Larry Kudlow, when that news came out, he said, don't worry, Larry agrees with me that tariffs are a good negotiating tactic. So perhaps Larry Kudlow got more than he bargained for. Perhaps he truly believed when he joined
Did Larry agree with him? I mean, the president said that, but you cover Larry. Did he agree with the president?
I believe, and he has said, and the president has said, that tariffs were a negotiating tactic, but they're clearly very, very much more than a negotiating tactic. They are the blunt instrument that the president prefers to use in every scenario, whether it's immigration, whether it's national security, whether it is trade. So he has made it clear he likes it, he gets the results he desires, he believes, and he thinks they're effective.
But what's happening today then, Dan? The argument earlier this week, whether it was Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, or David Solomon, CEO of Goldman, who said we could tip into recession if the president stays on this path with the trade wars. Well, yesterday he said, OK, guys, I'm not staying on the path. I'm retreating. Yet the market's down. What is it now? 400?
Yeah, so I think you have to go back to July 31st, and that's the issue. We're seeing a global deceleration of economic data. We just see it this week. We see industrial production here in the U.S. this week. We see in China manufacturing data is going back to levels it has not seen since 2002. We've seen really weak data out of Germany. So what's happening here is that while we think we have this great economy, and this is one issue I take huge issue with Larry Kudlow, he's basically lying to the American people every time he comes on air and says the American economy is crushing it. We're averaging about 2.5% GDP a year during the Trump administration, which is just
when he said
a
hair above 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah. So we're just basically seeing a global deceleration in economic activity. Further tariffs just make the ability to accelerate that.
Stephanie, I think it's important, though. The banner says that the markets are triggering a recession warning. The thing that happened this morning that is causing the market to sell off is 12 to 18 months down the road.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.